So, back when my wife and I were looking at going to Thailand for a church planting effort there, it was around that stage of life that I think especially became interested in alternative building technology. Partly maybe because I was thinking about, well, what kind of building technology would be available or what could I do over there, for building perhaps. But I was just kind of generally interested in um, I guess this was also in the time frame shortly after our marriage, and I had just built a home, and I was interested in building technologies, and I think underneath it all, kind of what fueled, at least I like new things and interesting things. Okay, but aside from that, um, home ownership is one of the major expenses that people have in their lives, and I was interested in. It felt kind of like back in my early married days, I suppose, it kind of felt like the need to make money was kind of a ball and chain, if you will. And that if we could just get rid of, like, some of these major expenses, we could create a lot of freedom in our lives. And so, if there was a way to, for instance, sort of hack the housing, if there was a housing hack of some kind that lets you build a house for very cheap, and then wouldn't that be amazing in terms of your financial freedom and things like that? Not being tied into the system, not having to work every day, go to your boring job every day, just in order to just provide the necessities. Like how dull is that? So I was interested in alternative building technologies. So of course there's straw bale homes. There are like compacted earth homes. So either you make bricks of compacted earth first with a special machine, or you actually build essentially forms for your walls and you compact earth in the walls. Um, there's some quirky ones like where you put glass bottles in your walls for insulation. There's the I think it's called the Earth Ship, maybe, which is one that has some level of popularity, especially in more kind of maybe arid climates where it got cold at night, where there was a big like thermal, at the big temperature change between your nighttime and your daytime. And so those were the kind built with tires. And so you would make the front wall of your house facing the sun. You would build that with tires that compacted, with dirt compacted inside the tires, I believe, as I recall that technology. So and then probably one of my favorite ones that I looked at was the earth bag technology. And so basically what you do is you put dirt in a bag. So it's basically dirt in a poly bag. So it's basically dirt and plastic. And you lay it down in a, usually these are circular homes, right? Because that circular, architecturally, the building derives its, or structurally derives its strength from the tension, essentially, or I don't know what all the proper words are to describe the forces at work, but basically, um, I think maybe you would even put like a wire of some type maybe down over each layer of the earth bags to help provide that tension. But anyway, essentially you just lay them down like bricks, but in the shape of a TP basically, and so it'd come up to a kind of like a cone or a peak at the top, and they're very very durable structures if you can get the poly bags properly protected. So on the outside, getting those protected from UV with a good plaster. They're very strong, I believe, within their limitations, right? So you maybe couldn't build one that was like 100 feet wide, maybe, but or maybe you could, I don't know. But in terms of like inexpensive, it looks at first glance like, wow, this is so inexpensive, right? Because just give me some plastic bags and some dirt, and I'm good to go, basically. Now, in reality, of course, one of the major issues that a lot of these technologies have is simply that labor costs are super high. And if you were to pay for labor right now, if you're just a DIY guy, and you're just gonna slowly build your house over 5 years, or you've got a gang of friends they'll come by and they'll have a house raising, so to speak. You know, there's some possibilities like that to where yes, you could have potentially a cost effective home. But anyway, so I built. I had some help then. but I built a little shed for our home up in Kansas that was made. I think the roof was made out of pallets, maybe. I might have built. I think I collected like the walls. I maybe pulled out of some other old structure that was, my dad had on some kind of rundown farm property or whatever. And yeah, so it was a very like kind of redneck hodgepodge structure. Um, and I think while it was inexpensive, I ended up Dad ended up paying someone to help me finish the project before we left for the mission field. So the time involved to get it actually working, it was probably so anyway, it cost my dad some money, I guess, because he helped us out with paying for some help on it. The actual labor costs or the materials costs for me, I'd say, were extremely low on that one. But yeah, so I think that there's sort of several approaches to projects like that. Take the shed project for instance, or in general housing, but building a structure, right? So it's like, well, do I redneck it, slash use alternative technologies? But anyways, do I go like super low capital with it, high labor, or do I go lower labor, higher capital? And looking at it now, I think my equation would probably look different. Now, does that mean that I'm always flush with capital now and would just disregard that element? No, certainly not. But when I think about the effort involved, sometimes doing something redneck versus just going out, buying the supplies you need, putting it together in a more conventional manner, it's like, okay, that's probably the better option. But yeah, it can be very fun to look at different technologies, and it's still probably one of my dreams would be to make housing to revolutionize the affordability of housing somehow. And I don't know if it's even possible. I don't know what it would take to do so. I don't know if people would even appreciate it if you did do it. So there are a lot of unknowns about that. But if there were technology that would allow people to, I guess Mr. Beast just did a housing video, so I need to watch that, where he built a whole bunch of houses. But if there were technology that allowed people to buy a really good home for very little money, and it wasn't, there's mobile homes, right? But even those are relatively expensive now, new. It's the cost of materials and labor and everything is just fairly expensive, this day and age. And it is true, like part of it is that our standards for living are pretty high. Like we expect a lot of comfort, we expect a lot of durability, typically in our housing. If we were okay in living in a cheap little tent, safari tent or something, right? Like maybe an expensive tent, but a cheap house. Sure, we could do something much more inexpensive, right? So part of it comes down to just what you're willing to have. But I think sort of my dream would be to have some type of housing scenario. It could be apartments, but I don't love apartments. But some kind of structure where it's like either it's some type of I forget the word now for it. 3D printing, yes. So like some type of 3D printed house, essentially, whether it's foam, plastics, concrete, whatever the case would be, or simply some or something else, right? But something that would allow houses to be made in an incredibly cheap way. And so, like, for, let's say you don't want to stay in those houses long term, maybe it's a pretty small house, maybe it's 500 to 1,000 square feet, right? So it's really small. But for young people getting started out and they want to become a homeowner, right? They don't want to simply, rent. But an option that would be like highly functional, be very comfortable. It wouldn't be prestigious, right? Because everybody would know that they're cheap, and they would probably look a lot the same, unless there's probably a way to alter that too. Maybe I guess you could paint them and whatever. But they would probably tend to look lots, pretty similar because that's the one way you make things cheap. So it's not like it would be everybody's dream house for sure, but the idea would be, I don't know if this is possible. This might violate the laws of economics, but for what it costs to rent right now, let's say right now you're on the lower income side of things. You're renting a home that's 1,000 square feet, and it's costing you, let's say $1,500, okay, or let's say $1,200, okay, and so rather than spending that $1,200 a month and having that be like kind of the peak of what you can afford, and that's that's all you can afford, kind of wrecks your finances, but hey, at least you're in a you're in something, right? Or you're spending, let's say, maybe even $1,000 a month, but it's like some really lousy house, right? So somewhere in that $1,000 to $1,200, either it's a tiny apartment that's new, or it's a little bit bigger house, but it's a really lousy house. So instead, we would have these starter homes, essentially, that would be built, and they would allow a couple or an individual to purchase a home. So you've got you can start working on your equity, and you can take advantage of some appreciation, things like that, right? And then you can hopefully save up, or sell or whatever, and be able to move into a home that you really want when you're maybe 10 years in or so. You buy the house that you really want to have. But as long as you don't require it to be like super prestigious, you can have that starter home. It can be your own. It can be very comfortable, very functional, and you can get that kind of head start financially in in your 20s. A lot of people are paying off student debt, and so it could just help reduce the overall financial burden on a family, on a small family, a young couple, whatever. Even singles that just want to get ahead, but that it's a little tougher. It could really, be a way to kind of make that big chunk that's housing a smaller chunk for people, and to improve their economic well-being. So, as you can tell, this is not a highly fleshed out idea in my mind. There may be many obstacles. In some ways, I would almost favor having it be maybe it would be better to have it be rentals, I don't know, but to make it like maybe I retain ownership of it as a commercial property, essentially, and I rent it out, but I rent it out very affordably, or I rent, maybe it could be something like this, right? You charge the rental price that a typical comparative, fairly normal for the market, right? But so let's say I'm going to charge them $1,200 a month to stay in this 1,000 square foot home. But it's going to be nice. It's going to work very well. It's going to be extremely functional, functional, and just a good practical housing. Okay, it's not going to be prestigious, but it's going to be good practical housing, and you're going to pay $1,200 a month to live there. But of that $1,200, we're going to set aside, my company, the Craig Miller Real Estate Holdings, we're going to set aside $500 a month of that money that you pay us, and we're going to put that into a special housing fund for you. And and then whenever you are ready to purchase another home, or ready to move out, or whatever, we could look at the various options on what the eligibility would be. But under certain parameters, you're eligible to get that $500 a month back, and it can be used to fund the purchase of your real home, if you will, the home that you really, the bigger home that you want. And so it would be you're not in that scenario, you're actually not really subsidizing it's kind of like one of those savings groups that people do in other countries or whatever, but you're not you're not actually just giving people something low cost and allowing them to. It's not like HUD housing or that kind of thing. It's it's more like full priced housing, but full priced housing that helps people save for the future and helps them to like get a leg up, if you will. And so that'd be one model you could look at. Now, I think it'd be cool for it could be cool for the whole widows and orphans side of things. For if there's single parent households, maybe they get a special discount, or for families with that people with disabilities. But there again, I mean, some of that stuff is probably covered a little bit more by some of the HUD housing, some of the federal housing programs. Whereas if it's purely the fact that you're an ordinary couple, but you don't have super duper amazing jobs, and you're young, and you want to make progress, and like, yes, I think a lot of couples probably like they dream of having like a nicer, bigger home, right? But if you're, maybe the degree you got in college doesn't lend itself necessarily to like a super high paying job. Maybe your career's weighted a bit more towards making an impact, for instance. Maybe you're a teacher or someone who wants to really do well in the world, but your job isn't that lucrative. Or maybe you want to have kids, but you feel like you can't afford it. There's so many reasons why. There's so many worthy individuals, if you will, right? That'd be so awesome to give them a helping hand, help them make progress. And I think housing is one of those things that tends to be a major expense. And if there was a way that you could reduce that would be an amazing way to make a difference in these people's lives and to help the overall goal of human thriving, of the kingdom, of having it be here on earth as it is in heaven, in terms of the kingdom.